Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to teach you how you could set up your own study for our next type of study, which is going to be a comparative study. So the past few days we were working with to what extent is one of our data points extraordinary compared to the rest of our data points. So that's one variable statistics where we have one data set and we're asking to what extent do we have an outlier. So you could see across in your three types of studies, we were doing this stick out study. We had one numerical set of data, and we were looking at to what extent do we have an outlier. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a similar type thing in terms of making visual meaning by box and whisker plots and cumulative frequency graphs and histogram. But this time we're going to actually have a comparative study that compares two data sets. So let me give you a few examples because you're actually going to pick your own topic. So here's example one. This is looking at to what extent do 2015 movies outperform 2005 movies by the gross revenue that they bring in. So my raw data obviously wasn't so clean, but I have the number one movie. This was the number one movie of 2015, its gross, and 2005, its gross. And if I go into my raw data, obviously it wasn't that clean at the beginning. I had to clean it up quite a bit. In 2005, we have 2015, Star Wars, Jurassic World's Avengers. And in 2005, it was Star Wars Chronicles, Harry Potter. And so I was looking at, here was our numerical data for 2005, and here was our numerical data for 2015. And then we have our control, which would be the rank. Another example is to look at something within social justice. So this was taken from the World Data Bank, and it looks at access to water, percent of the population with access to clean water. And what I could do here is I could compare 2 years. So to what extent has water access improved? Does 2010 outperform 1990? So I have my countries, Ethiopia, and here's Ethiopia's data point for 1990, and I could use that as data set one, and then I could scroll to 2010 and look at that for data set two. And so again, I would have sort of the same setup. Here's my data set one, here's my data set two, and then in pink is my control. Let's see, not only could I look at social justice, but I could look at some music. So this is taken our, you'll recognize this data, this is the best-selling albums of all time. But instead of asking to what extent is Michael Jackson an outlier, what I could do is organize this according to the year released. So I would sort it by the range and do it by the year, sort range by year. And then I would ask to what extent do older albums outperform newer albums or vice versa. I could also recategorize that. I think I have it somewhere here. IBMS studies, where I organize it a different way. In mass studies, we actually decided not to organize it by year, but to organize it by whether or not the artist was a band or a solo artist. So here is our raw data, and then we added a column to the right, and we categorized these by whether it was a band or a solo artist, and asked the question, to what extent do bands outperform solo artists? So if you wanted to look at music, that's a comparative study that you could do. Another thing you could look at, let's see, you could look at sports, and you could ask to what extent do the New York Yankees outperform the Boston Red Sox? And maybe you look at their win percentage every year going back to 1964. There's data really all over the world. One thing that I'm curious about, I was listening to the radio the other day. They have NBA referee stats. And I would be curious to know, so they have all these numbers on referees, and this list could be categorized a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of different studies to look at within here, but they do have the experience in years, and I would want to know to what extent do older referees outperform younger referees, or vice versa, in terms of their foul differential between home teams and away teams. So anywhere where you can find some sort of data table that interests you, there's a way to categorize that data table and organize it so you have two different data sets. Your ultimate goal, really a good way of organizing it, is to have your control here and data set one and comparing it to data set two. So that's your ultimate goal in thinking about a comparative data comparative data analysis. And then what we're going to do is you're working towards the same exact things as what you did with your stickout study. So we want your statistical summary table. This is an IB Math Studies one. It's a little different than yours. You should do the one that you did for your stickout study. So your final statistical summary table should look exactly like this, except you'll have another category here, category 1 and category 2. And then we'll be able to make comparisons between them. We'd also want to produce a box and whisker plot for category 1 versus category 2. And again, that will look like, let's see, comparative box and whisker plot. You'll end up doing 2 box and whisker plots this time. So you'll have your category 1 and your category 2, and we'll be able to compare their box and whisker plots and look at, does one outperform the other? So your biggest task for today is to get a topic going, and in your spreadsheet, work on these 2 tabs. So get some raw data going in here, and then clean it up by categorizing it and making sure it's organized for analysis. So you could do 2 separate statistics tables, 2 separate box and whisker plots, and 2 different cumulative frequency graphs to determine, does category 1 outperform category 2 or vice versa.